I think, being open-minded and educating yourself about people who are different from you is crucial. Like finding ways to meet and learn about others, people who aren't like you. I mean, in the course of, in this country, um, different eras. There's been different people who have been constitutional outsiders. At one point it was sort of the threat of like Italian anarchists who were seen as the real threat, and then there was the Red Scare in the 50s. I'm a Jewish person, and my ancestors were persecuted for that reason. Um, and I think that learning from that history. I mean, we're all people, and the Muslim faith is a beautiful religion, like the Christian faith and the Jewish faith and all the others in this country, and sort of um, coming to sort of appreciate that and learn about that in a way that makes a person just not prejudiced. I mean, our culture has been so kind of suffused with these um, suppositions and sort of like predispositions to suspect people just because they're Muslim. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to try to sort of um, reach out across communities and realize that we have sort of so much in common, really, so much more in common.
Thank you. Dr. Siddiqui, did you want to
Yeah,
answer that?
in the late 90s through 2004, I worked for the Islamic Society of North America. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that the people that used to attack Muslims in the late 90s and even in that early period right after 9/11 many of them are now allies of the Muslim community. And and I also think about the boxes that we as Muslims had to sort of contort ourselves prior to 9/11 and the boxes that we have to contort ourselves in to be acceptable now to our allies. This is problematic, right? I think so. The message that I would have to both sides, to Muslims, is let's stop contorting, right? I think it should be acceptable for us to be who we are. I mean, and so that's one piece. So Muslims have to be able to sort of uh, aspire to be themselves uh, and find beauty in the difference of who we are. There's no one Muslim American group, right? There's so many. We're a highly diverse group, so we need to find the beauty in our own diversity, and I think we need to do that. And I think when it comes to our allies, they should have fewer boxes for us. What is acceptable, what is not. They should be our allies because it is un-American for people that are different to be treated differently under our law, right? We're talking about legal. It should just not be acceptable. And sometimes, and as a former attorney, I represented people that I did not like, whose values I didn't share. But it was my responsibility for them to have the best legal representation. And that is an ideal that we should always sort of lift up. So there are Muslims that you won't like. There are Muslims that I don't like, right? There are many people that don't like me, so including my own home, right? But we have to find value in what we have, right? And so that's the piece. The thing that tires me 20 years later is this Islamophilia boxes that have been created that we have to fit in order for us to have allies to be represented in courts and in civil rights battles or in public advocacy. And I think it's racism from both the left and the right and in the center. And I think that's something that I would. It's far too easy to say that Islamophobia comes from the right. Islamophobia comes from the United States of America, left, right, and center, and I think it should stop.
Great point. There is beauty in diversity and power in diversity and coalitions in diversity, as we talked about earlier. So this kind of connects to this broader question about what has changed in 20 years, particularly around the legal issues, the legal landscape. And there have been a couple of references to this, but how has the legal landscape changed over the last 20 years since 9/11? And how do we address that change to bring about transformative change? What have been the fundamental changes in the legal system, and how do we either fight those or take advantage of those?
Could I hazard an answer here? So I think what we've heard is a relentless drumbeat of, the government and outside groups, trumpeting this message that Islam is dangerous. And this predates 9/11, by the way. I'm sure some of you probably remember my father wrote a book called Covering Islam, and that came out in 1981, right? And if you just change the names and the dates, it would still be true today. Especially, and the subtitle of the book is How the Media and the Experts Determine What We Think About Islam, or something like that. And that book had a very profound effect on me. And it basically, what we've seen is the one of the few I think benefits of this relentless assault on the notion of Islam, 1 point whatever billion people, many different faiths, sects, etc., groups, backgrounds, this idea that it's a monolith, which is completely crazy, and is correlated to terrorism or a propensity to commit terrorism, has not worked out. Has not. There was no proof ever that was true, and these cases have proved it, right? I mean, the sheer number of cases that depended on informants to make up the plot and basically hand the so-called bomb to the guy and pressure him to pretend to pull the trigger type thing. The search for sleeper cells. Remember when we were all obsessed with sleeper cells? I mean, they never existed. So I think, despite the fact that the government now has this legal arsenal that it's amassed, who's it going to use it against? I mean, we've heard today from the panelists, right, and in the other talk and panel, this is a community of people who overwhelmingly want to be part of the United States. I mean, I would probably say I'm much more critical in my view of being part of the United States than a lot of what I've heard today. But that's the overwhelming sense of it, and because the government can't really point to this, I think you've seen a lot of their claims have been subject to more scrutiny, have been taken with a grain of salt, because it's coupled with this type of naked bias. And I think one of the reasons why you saw people in the streets for the travel ban, for example, is because it was so, you couldn't deny the bias. You couldn't deny that, and I think Americans have developed in the 200 plus years of this country, especially in the last decade, you've seen a great deal more understanding that this type of bias is completely unacceptable, this overt bias. And so at least we've made that step.